So the first thing that occurred that I can clearly remember while writing this was one night, when I was about 8-ish, my grandparents were visiting and I slept downstairs on the couch, and at one point got up to go to the bathroom. Right in front of me, I see a tall black silhouette of a man walk into the bathroom ahead of me. So I held it and went back to bed. The next morning I asked my dad, grandpa, and oldest brother if they went downstairs and nobody did. I wasn't dreaming and have never had any sort of issues with sleepwalking or anything. Months, maybe a year later, I felt someone sit on the edge of my bed, and being young, I wasn't actually asleep, just pretending. The door to my room never opened, and my parents never checked on me that way to see if I was asleep. That alone isn't all that scary. But a few nights after that, I slept in the same room with my brother at this age, and we both got really freaked out because I had a Blue's Clues toy that sang Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, and it went off randomly from our closet. It wasn't a battery issue because it worked fine the next day and didn't do that ever again. Flash forward to about 10 years old, and I was in that same room, which by then had become my older brother's, who we'll call Z. As for my closest brother in age, we'll call him J, and I were older, and we had an empty room with my oldest brother, A, who moved out. I was in there getting the garbage and the wind made the door slam shut, which scared me. So I dove onto his bed and was honestly too afraid to get up because it just really scared me. And I clearly remember the pillow underneath me, from the middle of the bed slowly being pulled out from under me and dropped on the floor. Another time in there, my mom was yelling at Jay and I for something, and I saw a man's face in the window reflection. By age 12, I thought I was tough and dumbly prayed to God to let me be able to see something, and I opened my eyes, and at my doorway was a little girl standing there in a white dress. It couldn't have been my imagination because I had a black hoodie hanging on my door, and this was clearly a person in white. Another time, I was home alone and upstairs watching TV with the door opened. I paused the TV and heard faint whispering, like a conversation, and it got louder. Not like yelling or talking, but just closer. So I closed the door and ignored it. My entire family later found out after all these events that my brother A had used a Ouija board in our house, and without knowing about the other stories except the one I asked him about with the man in the bathroom, told us how he'd apparently contacted spirits in our house of our great-grandma, the one who sat on my bed, 2 children, one of which I saw in my room, and a military vet, the tall man who walked in front of me. Scariest part is, he also learned of some apparently bad spirits that were or are in our basement, the voices. What makes all this worse is that we have dogs now, and one time our German Shepherd was hanging out with me and started wagging her tail and getting excited, not with me, but with the corner of our living room, where my dad has older things from when he was a kid, and she kept staring over there like somebody was right next to me. And even now, thinking about it, writing about it, or talking about it makes me tear up and feel very uneasy, which could just be that it has scared me this much, despite me now being 20. After my wife and I got married, we got our first apartment together about 1.5 years ago. While the apartment was still mostly empty, limited furniture, we had a good argument. I don't remember what about, as it lost its importance. It was nighttime and she stormed off angry to the bedroom while I sat there silently fuming on the couch. It took me a small moment, but I suddenly realized that the breathing I was listening to was not my own. It was deep and almost had a rasp to it. It came very clearly from our dining room area. I remained on the couch just listening to it for several minutes. At least it felt that way. In reality, it was likely no more than 2. I decided that I needed to go talk to my wife. I couldn't have our night end in a fight. I stood up and walked to the bedroom. She was sitting in the bed with her back to the wall looking at her phone. I sat down next to her to discuss the issue we fought over calmly. While we were talking, she asked, "Do you hear that? Who's in the living room?" We listened to the obvious sound of floorboards creaking under each heavy footfall. It was as though someone large was pacing around in front of the TV, which was off. Moments later, the footfalls thundered rapidly, pounding on the floor or down our short hallway, stopping right at our bedroom door, which I had not closed. We both shot up in bed and stared at the empty doorway. We were covered in goosebumps and more than a little alarmed. Our fight was over, forgotten. She asked me what was happening. I told her, very calmly, about some of my other past experiences and explained in her one absolute truth of it all. At 37 years old, I'm still here, unscathed. They can't do anything. Whatever was there heard my speech. It was intended as much for it as it was for my wife. It left. It was gone very suddenly, with no remaining feeling of dread or anything ominous still in our home. Fast forward about 8 months or so, and we were both headed to bed. She was plugging in her phone on the charger, and as I picked up the cat, set her in the hallway and closed the door. I shut off the lights and got in bed. I'm laying there on my side with my eyes half cocked on the partially open closet. It was dark, and I could see our clothes very obviously, but there was something else I couldn't identify. It was something obscuring my vision. I wasn't sure what I was looking at. It was then that my wife said, "Why is Rose, the cat, in the closet?" "What?" I said to her while in my head knowing I put her out. "I see eyes." "Oh my God, it's a face," I said. "Oh crap." I put Rose outside. I jumped up and made for the lamp very quickly. The lights went on, and whatever she saw was gone. We were unable to sleep after that. We watched a movie until she calmed down, but it shook her pretty good. We weren't really sure that those 2 events are connected in any way. I've had a number of paranormal encounters in my life. I do believe in ghosts because, quite frankly, if they don't exist, it means I've got some seriously deep and twisted delusional disorder or something. I'll take the ghosts. None of my experiences come close to measuring up to the few months I worked at a haunted aquarium fish store in Portland, Oregon. This was likely the oddest job I'll ever have in my life, even without the ghosts. I actually worked in the basement of the store where fish were received via worldwide mail orders. My job was to nurse the fish back to health and make them happy, pretty, before they got sold in the store upstairs or to private buyers. I tended to about 100 tanks of various kinds of fish on my row. The first week I worked, I kept thinking my supervisor was standing at the end of my work row watching me. I'd get the feeling I was being watched. I'd turn, no one would be there. The second week, I'd get the same feeling, but when I turned, this hulking, opaque shadow figure would be there for just a moment. By the end of the first month, I was seeing Shadow Man almost daily. Being bumped by him, seeing him walk around the shop with a limp, hearing his sighs in my ear, even nearly falling off a ladder once because he came up behind me and blew a powerful gust of air on the back of my neck. It was such a strong force it blew my hair all over the place. Scared the hell out of me. I did not enjoy the energy, demeanor, or presence of this thing. It basically acted like an abusive boss, breathing down my neck and stalking me all the time. I didn't say anything to anyone at first because I really needed that job and didn't want to be let go. Eventually, I started getting close with a coworker, and I told her what I was experiencing. She had worked there for years, and her response was, "You see him too. Have you encountered the hippie ghost yet? That one's my favorite. Weird tie-dye. I bet it'll come around." Apparently, this presence smelled like patchouli and weed. I never encountered it. As I learned more, I came to understand that my boss, the owner of the whole business, was vehemently in denial that the place was haunted. If anyone brought it up to him, he would just shut down altogether. Apparently, he lost a lot of employees because of the ghosts. One time, he and I were walking down a row of tanks toward a tall stack of newly emptied sizable cardboard boxes. The top box suddenly launched itself about 50 feet, smacking the wall all the way to the other side of the room. He immediately looked at me and said, "Did you see that?" I got super flustered and quickly walked out of the room. Another time I heard a voice right in my ear, clear as a bell, and out of the blue when I was standing in the break area. It was a little girl who said, "Excuse me," very sweetly. It was not the same voice as any of my coworkers. I didn't share about that one with anyone because I'd only ever associated hearing voices with being schizophrenic. I wasn't ready to face that possibility just yet. The coup de grace came right at the end of my time there. I was moving out of Portland, and my coworker, and dear friend by then, and I decided we wanted to do an EVP recording. I asked my boss if we could come in on the weekend and do the recording, and he just shrugged his shoulders and rolled his eyes and told us to knock ourselves out. We set up on a Sunday. The only other human there was the cleaning lady. We let the tape recorder roll for about an hour as we just walked around the place and chatted. Then we packed up. I decided to play the recording back on my drive home and nearly crashed my car. There are voices all over that hour of recording. I had hoped to hear the Shadow Man's voice, and he is on there, I think, saying, "I looked everywhere," in a really angry tone. But the main voice that's on the recording is a little girl. She says several things. The most chilling and clear of all is, "Do you want me to leave, Daddy?" It's the exact voice I heard in my ear that one day during break. The next day I saw my boss, and he just casually asked, "So how'd the recording go? Get anything?" I said yes. It's the craziest thing. I expected to get a man's voice, but the main voice we got is a little girl's. The color immediately drained from his face, and he rushed out of the office. The office assistant had overheard the conversation and said, "Dude, that's messed up. You shouldn't joke with him like that." I had no idea what I did wrong, so I asked for clarification. Turns out, my boss's wife absolutely refused to go down to the basement anymore because she claimed that a little girl's ghost was always trying to hold her hand and ask her questions. My boss's wife practiced Santeria. The assistant took me around all the fish tanks in the place, and she had placed Santeria wards to keep away evil. I had always just thought they were funky decorations. I still have the recording. Not too sure what to do with it besides share it with friends every so often. I'm glad for the experience. It keeps me humble and curious. I'm also damn glad to not work there anymore. During Christmas, my mom said someone kept knocking at her bedroom door in my house. The first knock woke her up. The second, she looked and saw someone in a red flannel shirt swaying outside the door through a now cracked door. "No one owns a red flannel shirt in my house," she said. "Brad, my husband, are you messing with me?" No answer. She told me she knows not to invite things in, so she just ignored it. Shortly before that, maybe a month or so, my 2-year-old daughter saw something outside. She looked at me, then looked into the void, then back at me and booked it into the house and tried to close the door on me, trying to get me away from something. Seriously, what could she have seen? When I rushed in with her, I felt tense and unease on my back all the way upstairs, all the way to her room. I ended up turning around and yelling, "Get out of my house," because I believe small children can see them better than adults. Since these 2 occurrences, I have seen a short, hunched shadow walk up my stairs. I hear footprints walk to the top of the stairs. I have had someone stand behind me, thinking it was my 6'3" tall kid. I turned around and said, "Get out," from behind me, but no one was there. I recently learned my daughter knows what monsters are, and she freaked out if you mention them, so I've been teaching her to yell, "Get out, monster." It's weird. Sometimes she looks behind me, or across the room, stares and maybe tenses up. I look to see what's there, but nothing is there, and she wants a hug or to get out of the room. For some quick background, my uncle inherited a big old house after his father. By old, I mean 17th or 18th century house. He lives in the area where I can only imagine flats and new houses are extremely expensive. So instead of buying something new, he and his family adapted part of the house to modern living, installed some form of central heating, renovated it, etc. Most of the house, however, was closed off and never used. They never needed this much space. It would cost so much money to take care of that. It was just not worth it. My cousin is just 1 year younger than me, so although they lived quite far away from us, we used to visit them each holiday, just so we could spend time together. And when we were about 12 or 13 years old enough to not cause much trouble, my cousin and me decided it was about time to explore the house a bit. It was around that time we became fascinated with horror movies and true ghost stories. So old house with unknown history surrounded by even more abandoned buildings was a perfect place to play in. It was around that time we started noticing weird things happening around the house. One time we would see her dog standing just behind a faraway gate. Her dog that passed away earlier that year, shot by a careless hunter. No neighbor had a dog this big, I can assure you. We would hear noises in a nearby park while going on a walk in the evening. Could have been animals, and boars would come around that area often, but we never dared to check. Nearby warehouses for crops were closed in the evenings, but we could often hear loud banging to the door from the inside. Never checked that either. One day, while trying to make a map of the house, we wandered to the attic, and the door would open for us, door leading to a room that was always closed off with a padlock, because the floor was too unstable to go in there. While we were walking towards it, the door opened up dramatically, hitting a wall with a loud bang. There was nothing inside, and there was no wind that day either that could open it. We ran away and told the story to my aunt. She went to the attic with us to check it, but she didn't take it seriously, nor did she believe us. The door was closed with a padlock. We were gone maybe for a few minutes. Despite all these strange occurrences, we were never really scared of the house. Sure, dark hallways spooked us out, and we would always rush to the light switch, trying to fight the feeling of being watched. But that's it. As the time passed, we just got used to the fact that the house might attract weird things. We sometimes joked around, even dropped a hi every once in a while to a ghost from the attic while passing the staircase. It was part of living in a house with history, and we just embraced it. It's not like we really saw anything scary, right? The first and only thing that actually terrifies me until this day happened a few years back. My uncle and aunt threw this big family party in the house. My cousin and I were about 15 and 16 years old at the time, which was too young to be part of the adult dinner table conversations, but old enough to take care of younger kids. There were 5 of them, all boys, and to entertain them somehow, we came up with a game we saw in The Conjuring. Yep, the horror movie. And the backflash, not the best idea. If you haven't seen the movie, in this game, you blindfold one person and the rest hides somewhere around. The blindfolded can ask other players to clap their hands and is supposed to find them following the sound. My cousin was the first blindfolded. Kids scattered around trying to quickly come up with some nice hiding spot, and me, being way too old to hide properly, just walked till one of the ends of a T-shaped hallway and squatted behind the long table. Obviously, it wasn't a very sneaky place to be in. So when we first clapped hands, my cousin appeared from behind the corner and started carefully making her way towards me. The only source of light was behind her, so I couldn't really see any details, just her silhouette standing out from the background. I waited silently as my cousin bent over and walked under the table. There was enough space to walk next to it, so I had no idea why she did it, but obviously, game was on, so I didn't say a word. I watched as she was getting closer and closer to me, basically crawling there, dragging both her dress and long hair at the floor, and I just wanted to laugh, because I thought it looked really stupid. When she was really close, I even had this thought about reaching my hand and touching her. That would scare the hell out of her, but I didn't. I don't quite remember what happened next. I think one of the kids got bored and made some sound in another part of the hallway, so my cousin turned around and quickly disappeared behind the corner. Someone else got caught in the round. Then we changed the game. Party was coming to an end peacefully. My family was staying there a few days longer, so we helped with cleaning afterwards. My cousin and I were doing the dishes, and during the conversation she mentioned how the kids like the games, etc. So obviously I brought up the situation from the beginning. Without thinking much, I said something like, "You looked so stupid crawling under the table, you know." Or, "Why did you walk under the table?" And I could see how my cousin's facial expression changed. She just seemed confused. "What are you talking about?" she asked. At this point, I'm convinced she's just trying to prank me, scare me, or something like that. So I'm not even worried. It is also an option she just forgot that it happened. At the beginning of the game, I was hiding behind the table in the hallway. You sneaked under it to catch me. I decided to remind her. But she was even more confused than before. "I never walked under any table," she replies. She sounded so genuine. I could even hear the nervousness in her voice, but I still wanted to accuse her of pulling a prank on me. But then I noticed something. My cousin had her hair tied up the whole day. It was long, yes, but in the hairstyle she kept, there was no way, absolutely no way, that she could drag it on the floor. It wasn't her under the table, and there was no other long-haired girl in the house. I have no idea what I saw back in that day. I am not schizophrenic, was never diagnosed at least. My depression never gave me hallucinations, and it wasn't at its peak moment back then anyway. I wasn't on any meds, I didn't drink, I didn't take drugs. It wasn't a shadow that I interpreted wrong. I was looking at it for way too long, and it was way too close to be talking about this kind of mistake. I have to believe that it was real. I don't know who it was or what it was. All I know is that I'm so thankful that I didn't try to touch her. The history of that house is one huge mystery to me. I have no knowledge about who lived in it before or what happened there before my family moved in. I only recently found out that there was allegedly a man who committed suicide in the unused part of the house. I'm not sure when that happened or who was the man. I'm trying to investigate the matter, but even when I find answers to these questions, I'm afraid it won't explain the apparition of the girl-like silhouette I saw in the hallway. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please give a like, leave a comment, and subscribe. Perhaps click the bell for notifications, and remember, hell is empty, and the devils are here.